Some things only happen in soap operas, and in real life too. Just ask the man who cried in the middle of a five-star restaurant because of 7 words written in colored pencil. If you're someone who loves a good story, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, or you'll miss the rest of this tale I'm about to tell. It was a Tuesday night, one of those nights when you expect nothing more than silence and slow digestion. But at the most expensive restaurant in town, a man in a flawless suit ordered the priciest dish on the menu. With the coldness of someone who had long lost the taste for life, his name, Dario Montecla, or O. Businessman, Millionaire, owner of 3 holdings for private jets, and not a single smile. He always sat at the same table, in the corner of the room, back to the wall and facing the world he controlled with numbers, but never with affection. The waiters feared him more than the restaurant's own bill. No one dared to chat. No one dared to make noise. And that night, everything was going as usual, until the arrival of a little girl in a blue dress. She looked about 7 or 8 years old. One sock had fallen down. She had a pencil tucked behind her ear, and a courage that didn't match the size of her body. She walked between tables holding a folded piece of paper in her hand, eyes sparkling as if carrying a secret that needed to be delivered. She stopped right next to Dario's table, gently pulled his napkin, and whispered, "Sir, this is for you." He didn't even look. He was too busy choosing between French or Argentinian wine, but he took the paper, almost out of reflex, and placed it beside his glass. The girl smiled and walked away. No mother, no father, no one in sight. She vanished between the marble columns as if she had never been there. And it was only after his second glass that Dario, in drunken boredom, decided to open the note. 7 words, written in pink pencil. The handwriting was childish, but the message made the world stop. "I'm sorry for being born, Daddy." The fork hit the floor. The wine spilled. And for the first time in years, Dario felt his chest ache. Not a physical pain. It was a weight. An echo of something he had buried. The words kept dancing before his eyes. The girl's voice echoed as if it were his own conscience disguised as a child. "Daddy." He looked around, trying to find the girl. Nothing. Ran to the entrance, asked the waiters, checked the restroom, made the whole restaurant stop, but no one knew. No one had seen her, and no one could understand why a man worth millions now seemed worth mere cents in front of a child's piece of paper. Dario returned to the table, sat down with trembling hands, and for the first time, he looked inward, because some things we read with our eyes, but feel with our hearts, and that note wasn't just an apology. It was the beginning of a buried story, one that now began to scream. And the strangest part is that Dario never had children. At least, that's what he always told himself. But the past has a funny way of showing up when you think it's gone. The restaurant returned to normal, but inside Dario, everything had turned upside down. The food had gone cold. The wine had soured. And that note burned in the palm of his hand. "I'm sorry for being born, Daddy." He reread it like someone trying to find a different meaning, a loophole, a relief. But there was none, only that, a punch. Direct, deep, and coming from a place he didn't know or didn't want to remember. Dario had always been good at forgetting names, faces, promises. His life was made of contracts, not hugs. He was the kind of man who solved everything with money, except the things that money can't reach. But that night, he didn't sleep. He came home, locked the door, turned off his phone, and went straight to a room he hadn't opened in almost 20 years. The attic. Up there, among dust and old ghosts, Dario pulled out the key to an old safe. Inside, a wooden box. Simple. And inside that box, letters. Photographs. Pregnancy tests, hospital, cards, and a name, written in blue marker on a yellow paper. Livia. Yes, he had heard that name before, and it wasn't from a soap opera. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and like an old movie reel, the memories started playing. The year was 2017. He was still a young investor, recently divorced. In a phase where he swore that love was a waste of time. That's when he met a sweet girl, a literature student who believed life needed poetry even in its bells. Her name, Clarice. They got involved for a few months, laughed, slept together, cried, and eventually they fought because Clarice wanted a home and Dario only wanted returns. Their last meeting was in a small coffee shop where she held an envelope and said, "You have the right to know, but I have the duty to protect," and then she left. He never opened the envelope, never called her back, sent flowers with the wrong name, and buried himself in work. The envelope was in the box to Dot. He finally opened it. Inside, an ultrasound image, and on the back of the black and white photo, a handwritten note, 8 weeks, heart beating strong. "Looks like you, Dario." That's when he collapsed to his knees on the floor. The little girl at the restaurant. The childish handwriting, the suffocated question, "I'm sorry for being born, Daddy." All this time, she had existed, and he had denied her. The man who knew the value of everything, but didn't know the meaning of anything. The next morning, Dario hired the best private investigator in the city. Name, neighborhood, school, any lead on a girl named Livia or a woman named Clarice. He wanted everything, everything he had spent a lifetime avoiding. But life doesn't like to be ignored. When it decides to collect, it charges interest. 2 nights later, Dario received a strange phone call. "Mr. Monteclaro, we found a girl with that name, but there's something you need to see with your own eyes." He didn't think twice, got in the car, and left. The address, a simple house in the suburbs. Low gate, a garden without flowers, but a clothesline full of tiny garments dancing in the wind. Dario parked. Got out. And when he knocked on the door, he was greeted by an elderly woman with white hair but sharp eyes. "Are you Livia's father?" He stammered. I don't know. I think I might be." She narrowed her eyes, opened the door slowly, and said a sentence that made his blood run cold. "Then you'd better come in, because she's been waiting far longer than you can imagine." But what Dario saw when he stepped through that door was about to change everything. The house was simple, but it smelled like life. Not luxury. It smelled like beans on the stove, bar soap on laundry, and that mess kids make in the living room and call a castle. Dario stepped in like a man entering a temple, unsure if he even belonged. There, unsure where to step, but carrying a note in his pocket and a knot in his throat. The elderly woman, whom he would later learn was named Dona Nilda, walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but with the steadiness of someone who's seen far more than she lets on. She made a silent gesture with her hand, pointed toward the end of the hallway. "She's in the bedroom. But before you go in, you need to know something." Dario froze. His heart pounded like it was repaying an old debt. "Know what?" Dona Nilda took a deep breath, as if lifting a heavy truth. "Clarice, the girl's mother, she passed 2 years ago. Cancer. It was found too late. The girl was 5. He closed his eyes. A silent thunder cracked inside him. But the father, did she talk about me? She did, every day, with a kind of hope that broke my heart. Dario bit his lip. The pride he wore on his face his whole life now melted into pure regret. Did she leave anything? A note? A letter? She did. Dona Nilda pointed to a shelf among children's books and drawings. There was a small box inside, a letter sealed with a familiar handwriting, signed Clarice. Dario took the envelope with trembling hands, but before opening it, he looked toward the bedroom door. That's when he heard it, a tiny voice, softly singing a lullaby. "Sleep, my angel, the world is so wide, but in my arms, nothing can reach you." The ground vanished under his feet, because he knew that song. It was the one Clarice used to hum after they made love. On cold nights in their first apartment, he took one step, then another. The cold doorknob felt twice as heavy. And then he opened the door. The bedroom was colorful, but simple. Stacks of books, rag dolls, a slow-turning ceiling fan. In the corner, a small bed, and in it, the girl with braided hair, one sock twisted. And the same smile he hadn't forgotten since the restaurant. She looked at him. Time froze. "You really came," she said softly. Dario tried to speak, but all he could manage was to smile, with eyes full of tears. "Are you my daddy?" He swallowed hard. I think. I always was. But it took me too long to understand." She picked up a paper from beside her bed. "This one is for you." It was another note. This time, with a drawing, a tall man holding hands with a little girl. Underneath, written in red pencil, "Now that you've found me, promise not to lose me again." Dario dropped to his knees, pressed his forehead to the floor. And cried, not like a millionaire. Not like a businessman, but like a father. Like a man who realizes that life is far too short for pride and farther long to live it alone. But before he could answer, the girl pointed to the window. Mom said she'd send you a sign. You were the one who found the note at the restaurant, right? Dario nodded. Yes, I did. She said if you were really my daddy, you'd feel it. Even if you didn't know, you'd feel it. And he smiled, because he had felt it from the very first moment. But when he turned back to Donna, Nilda standing in the hallway, she held Clarissa's letter open and read it aloud, voice trembling. If he finds this girl, then there's still hope for this world. Dario closed his eyes, but what he didn't know was that this reunion was only the beginning of a whole new emotional maze. Because not everything is so simple, and not every hug can heal what's been broken. Asterisk, what was supposed to be the end of a search became the beginning of a new dilemma. Dario had found the girl, or better, the girl had found him, but now came the questions, the doubts, and the ghosts that money can't bury. That night, he didn't leave. He slept right there, on Donna Nilda's living room couch. He simply couldn't go. Not after hearing that little girl sing, not after reading Clarissa's letter. Asterisk, Dario. If this letter ever reaches you, it means fate decided you still deserve a second chance. I never kept resentment. I kept silence. I chose to raise our daughter far from the coldness of your numbers, but full of the poetry you once showed me and then forgot. Livia has your eyes, your temper, your stubbornness, but she has my heart, and it always waited for you. Asterisk, he folded the letter, placed it inside the inner pocket of his suit, and felt that inside that faded envelope was more value than all the fortune he had ever built. But life, my friend, life doesn't hand out answers before charging you the price of your questions. The next day, Dario requested custody of the girl. I want to do everything right, with lawyers, psychologists, whatever it takes. I want to take her with me, give her everything she never had. Donna Nilda looked deep into his eyes. Do you want to take the girl, or carry the weight of guilt? Dario stayed silent. She doesn't need a bedroom with a crystal chandelier. She needs presence, constancy, and a father who doesn't run when he gets scared. I won't run. I hope not. And then came the first bombshell. As part of the custody process, the judge ordered a DNA test. Routine. But when the envelope arrived with the results, the world turned upside down. Probability of paternity, 0%. Dario collapsed into the office chair. This can't be right. He reread it, shaking, called the lab, asked for a retest. Did another, and another. Same result. What do you mean? I'm not the father. When Donna Nilda found out, she simply sighed. Life sometimes likes to play tricks on us. Dario went to the girl's bedroom, sat down on her bed. Livia, I need to ask you something. Are you leaving too? No, sweetheart. But do you know who your dad was? She furrowed her brow. Drew a shape in the air with her finger. Mom said my dad was a good man, but he was scared, and that time would fix his fear. Did she ever say his name? The girl thought for a moment, then whispered, Dario. His name. Clarice had told her, even knowing he wasn't the biological father. She gave her daughter that name. As if hoping he would become the father. As if a sweet lie was less cruel than the real absence. And that's when Dario understood. Clarice chose him, even after everything, even though he wasn't the father by blood. He was the father by story. By fate. But justice doesn't care about symbolism, and the judge, standing by the DNA test, denied the custody request. Dario lost, and for the first time in his life, he faced a no that no amount of money could overturn. But the heart had other plans, because Livia, she ran away from home 2 nights later, left behind a note, just like the first one. If you can't be my dad on paper, then meet me where only the heart signs. I'm waiting at the same restaurant. Dario dropped everything, ran out like a madman, arrived there nearly at midnight, and there she was, sitting at the same table where it all began, with an orange juice to straws and an empty seat waiting for him. You came, always will. She smiled, and at that moment, Dario wasn't a millionaire. Not a CEO, not a businessman, just a man trying to be worthy of the love he had received without deserving it. But what he still didn't know was that the real biological father was much closer than he imagined, and ready to fight for what he never had the courage to claim. The reunion at the restaurant felt like a movie scene. Livia with that smile that held the whole world. Dario with his shattered chest, trying to stitch together with words what life had patched with silence. But while the two laughed and shared a slice of apple pie, far away, fate was sharpening his knife, because truth, my friend, is like a seed. You can bury it in the ground, but one day it sprouts, and once it sprouts, there's no pretending you didn't see it. The following week, Dario began adoption proceedings. DNA didn't matter anymore. Love did. The bond he was willing to build, day by day, gesture by gesture, that's what mattered. I don't want to be a weekend visitor. I want to take her to school, scold her, take her to the doctor, listen to her secrets. I want to be a real father, not just on paper. The judge looked skeptical. Do you understand the responsibility? The girl lost her mother, and you showed up 2 weeks ago. I lost 20 years, and I'm still here. The judge scheduled a hearing, and that's when the other one showed up. Tall, dark skin, wrinkled suit, tired eyes. His name was Rubens. Mid-30s. Or IDESHA or E-driver. I'm Livia's biological father, and I want my daughter back. The bomb hit the process like lightning in a clear sky. Dario couldn't believe it. You. Why now? Rubens took a deep breath. I was afraid. When I found out about the pregnancy, I ran. Coward, I know, but I watched from a distance. I knew Clarice wouldn't put my name on the certificate. She hated weakness, and now you show up, after she's already built another bond. Now I'm a man. Now I want to do what's right. The judge, cautiously, ordered a psychological evaluation. Livia would need to be heard. In the consultation room, holding a teddy bear in her lap, she answered the psychologist with the purity only a child can have. Mom said a dad is someone who stays, someone who hears. When we cry quietly, someone who doesn't just promise, they show up. Someone who knows the color of your toothbrush. And is Dario that to you? Yes. He came later, but feels like he's been here all along. He just forgot me for a while. The psychologist smiled. But in the report, the conclusion was technical. The emotional bond with Mr. Dario is evident, but the biological connection with Mr. Rubens cannot be ignored. The judge scheduled a special hearing. 3 people sitting before the court of life: Dario, Rubens, and Livia. Rubens tried to explain, I messed up, but I want a chance. I want to start over. Dario didn't interrupt, just listen. Until the judge asked, Livia, do you understand what's happening? She nodded. 2 men saying they love me, but neither one asked me what I want. Silence. The judge leaned forward. And what do you want, Livia? She looked at both of them, then at Dona Nilda in the back of the room, clutching her rosary like a lifeline. Then she said, I want people to stop deciding for me. I want to stay where my heart lives, and my heart lives in Dario's lap. Rubens cried, but not out of anger, out of guilt. She's right. I wasn't a father. I only showed up when the flower had already turned into a tree. Dario held his hand. You don't have to step aside. We can share. Livia doesn't need a perfect dad. She needs decent adults. The judge granted temporary joint custody. A new hearing would be held in 6 months. But in that courtroom, there were no winners. Just 3 people trying to mend what life had torn apart. Rubens left in silence. Dario took Livia home, and on the way, she asked, Are you going to leave too, like the other one? He stopped the car, looked into her eyes. I'll only leave when you teach me how to draw like you, because I'm terrible with colored pencils. She laughed. Then, it's going to take a while. Good. But what they didn't know is that Rubens was hiding one last secret, a medical report, a test result, and a confession, because Clarice hadn't told everything. Not to Rubens, not to Dario. And what was coming next was stronger than any bond. It was something that could destroy everything all over again. Some people keep secrets for protection, others out of cowardice, but some keep them out of love. And that's the kind that hurts the most, because it's wrapped in kisses never given and hugs that never came. Rubens had been restless since the hearing. Even with shared custody granted, something about him seemed out of place. An unease in his gaze, like a shadow he couldn't shake. Dario noticed. Is there something you want to tell me, Rubens? The man avoided eye contact. Not yet, maybe later. But later became the ghost that followed them all. And it was one Sunday afternoon, at the park. That time refused to wait any longer. Livia was playing with other kids. Dario and Rubens sat on a wooden bench, side by side, yet with entire worlds between them. She likes you. You know, Rubens said, and I love her like she came from me. Silence. Rubens pulled an envelope from his pocket. I need to show you something. And it's not easy. Dario took the envelope, confused. Inside, a medical report, complicated terms, technical language, but the conclusion was clear. Rubens has had no reproductive ability since age 19. Dario's eyes widened. You can't have children? Not biologically. A motorcycle accident. I found out years later. Never told anyone. Not even Clarice. But then, I'm not Livia's biological father either. Dario. The world stopped. Again. Dario fell silent. Rubens looked like a castaway confessing he never learned how to swim. But she said you were her father. I thought I was. When Clarice got pregnant, even though we weren't together, she found me, asked me not to get involved, but she kept in touch for a while. Then she disappeared. I believed the girl was mine. I wanted to believe. Dario rubbed his face. So who is her father? Rubens just shook his head. Clarice never said. Maybe not even she knew. But one thing I know, she loved the girl more than anything. And she chose the name Livia because she said it sounded light. So life wouldn't weigh heavily on her daughter. Dario felt his chest burn. Everything he had built, the cases, the papers, the guilt, the forgiveness, all blurred together. Because now, everything felt like sand slipping through his fingers. She doesn't have a known biological father. We're just strangers trying to be part of a home that never existed. Rubens sighed. But maybe that's exactly what makes us the right ones. Because we don't want her to fill a gap in a DNA test. We want her for who she is. Dario looked toward the playground. Livia was laughing on the slide, her braids flying through the air. And in that laugh was more truth than any lab result could ever offer. That night, Dario went to her room, sat at the edge of the bed. Livia, can I tell you a secret? Sure. We found out that neither I nor Rubens are your biological father. She stayed quiet, but didn't seem shaken. It's okay. You're not sad. She smiled. No, because blood lives in the body, but love lives in the routine. Dario felt his eyes fill again. Do you forgive me for not being what you expected? She wrapped her arms around his neck. You're everything I needed. But before their hearts could finally rest, the next day, a letter arrived from an unknown sender. Inside, a single page, a bank statement. And a handwritten note. If you really want to care for Livia, you need to know the truth about Clarice's inheritance. And the real reason she disappeared. Search for the name. Celso Andrade. He was Clarice's former boss, a powerful man, and the reason she had vanished without a trace. What was coming now wasn't about fatherhood. It was about justice. About wounds Clarice hid out of fear, and that now were demanding to be heard. The name Celso Andrade immediately set off alarm bells in Dario's mind. It wasn't just any name. It was the kind of name that opens doors with a single phone call and slams them shut for anyone who dares to push back. Influential businessman, owner of a chain of private clinics, private universities, and the kind of fortune that doesn't show up on Forbes, but weighs in every political office. Dario dug through Clarice's old documents, and there it was. An ID badge from the Andrade Educational Foundation, dated 2016. Clarice had worked there as a secretary for a year. Then, she vanished from every record. No other jobs. No further documentation. Dario scheduled a visit to the foundation, using the name of one of his business branches. He arrived as a supposed investor, but what he really wanted was just one thing: to understand why a woman like Clarice had disappeared. So suddenly, the receptionist, after much prodding, finally said, Clarice, the one who vanished? I heard she had a thing with Dr. Andrade, but that's just gossip. Dario swallowed hard. He decided to dig deeper. Used contacts, lawyers, and discovered what the bank statement had started to suggest. Clarice had received monthly deposits from an account tied to a shell company controlled by Celso Andrade for 4 years. Fixed amounts, no description. It looked like hush money, or worse, silence bought at the cost of pain. Dario went home that night with his stomach in knots. He showed everything to Rubens and Dona Nilda. She was being paid to disappear. Nilda clutched her rosary tightly or threatened to stay quiet. That idea hit like lightning, and it made sense. Clarice had always avoided talking about her past. She had anxiety attacks, changed phones constantly, never left the girl alone, always seemed to be running from something or someone. Dario decided to confront Celso and Ray directly. He arranged a meeting, pretending to be interested in a business partnership. The building was luxurious, reception glimmering, private security all around. Celso arrived with a plastic smile. Dario Monteclaro, a pleasure to finally meet you. Let's cut to the chase. I'm here to talk about Clarice. The air went cold. Celso kept his composure. Clarice. Ah yes, that girl. Such a shame. Very promising. You paid for her silence. Why? Celso raised an eyebrow. Careful with your tone, Monteclaro. What are you basing that on? Hallway gossip. Dario threw the documents on the table. I'm basing it on this. Celso looked over the papers, unbothered. That proves nothing. I helped a former employee in need. Is that a crime now? It is if you're the one who created her need. Tension rose. Are you looking for enemies, Monteclaro? I can buy 3 of you before breakfast. Dario stood up, calm but firm. But you can't buy the truth, and I'll find it, for her daughter. For every woman you tried to erase. Celso only smiled, venomous. Then good luck, with whatever's left of you. Dario left the building with blood boiling. This was war now. And Clarice, she was the spark demanding justice. Dario knew going against someone like Celso and Raid was like trying to punch the wind, invisible, slippery, and with tentacles in every corner. But he didn't back down. He began searching for former employees. Some had left the country. Others had vanished like Clarice. But one agreed to talk, under one condition, no recordings. Her name was Jonah, former administrative coordinator at the foundation. They met in a quiet cafe, mid-afternoon. Clarice was one of the few who spoke her mind. And for that, she paid the price. Was she harassed? Jonah lowered her gaze. More than that, she was coerced. She didn't give in, and she threatened to report it. The next day, she vanished. They said she quit, but I saw it. She was escorted out. Eyes red, holding an envelope. Did you see anything else? Jonah hesitated, then pulled out a printout of an old email from her purse. Asterisk, if anything happens to me, don't let my daughter be raised by anyone who wears a suit and speaks softly. They always hide more than they say. Clarice, asterisk, Dario kept the paper like it was gold. This was personal now. He went back home and told Rubens, Donna Nilda, and yes, Livia too. Your mom was very brave. And now, it's our turn to do what she couldn't. Livia just held his hand. Do you think she was afraid? I think she was stronger than her fear. The next morning, Dario gave an exclusive interview to an investigative journalist. He showed the bank transfers. The email opened the foundation's records. Days later, a front-page article shook the country. Network of silence. Former employees denounce abuse at Andrade Foundation. Celso was cornered. Started using his influence. Tried to deny everything, but the story had already escaped the cage, and Clarice's name became a symbol of resistance. Asterisk. The morning of the hearing felt longer than all the years Dario had spent away from the idea of family. The tide didn't choke him around the neck. It squeezed what was left of his soul, and each step down the courthouse hallway felt like walking over memories he'd never had time to build. Livia walked beside him in a blue dress, the same one from the earliest memories, now with a new ribbon in her hair and a courage that didn't match her age. Rubens and Donna Nilda followed behind, silent, eyes full of both hope and farewell. This was the final hearing, the one about adoption. Dario took deep breaths. So did Rubens. Both knew this was more than paperwork. It was the end of a story about abandonment and the start of one about permanence. The judge entered the room, a firm look, a tired but fair face. We're here to decide the legal future of Livia Andrade. We have the psychologist's report, the history of provisional custody, and the adoption documents. Before issuing my verdict, I want to hear from you, Dotmer. Rubens stood. No script, just truth. Your Honor, I was a mistake at the beginning of my daughter's life. I was absence. I was silence. And maybe the bravest thing I've ever done is to say that out loud. He turned to Dario. But this man, he showed up when no one else had the courage, when life had already taught us that waiting is almost the same as losing. He took a little girl, broken by time, and turned her into a home. I never did that, but he did, and for that, I'm stepping aside, because being a father in the end, isn't about planning. It's about watering. The judge nodded. Now it was Dario's turn. He stood. His hands trembled, but his voice came out strong, like hot iron on old wood. I grew up believing affection was weakness, that the world was something to conquer, not live. Until one day, a little girl gave me a note. 7 words, and in that childish paper, she reminded me of everything I'd never known how to feel. Since then, everything I do is to become someone she can call home. I'm not perfect, but I promise to be consistent and never give up. The judge turned to Livia. And you, Livia, do you still want him to be your father? She smiled with the calm of a child who's already suffered enough to understand what really matters. He already is. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The judge took a deep breath, picked up her pen. And signed. Adoption granted. New registered name, Livia Monteclaro. Dona Nilda brought her hands to her face, crying. Rubens bowed his head, smiling through grief and relief, and Dario knelt before his daughter, hugging her like he could shield her from the entire past. That night, there was no luxury. There was life. Carrot cake with too much chocolate icing, ice cream from the corner shop, and a new purple bike with a basket and a big bow. Livia rode in circles in the backyard, laughing out loud. And with every turn of the wheels, it felt like a little bit of pain was erased. Dario watched her, lying on the grass, heart finally breathing. On the living room wall, they hung the first official photo, Clarice holding baby Livia, wrapped in a floral blanket. And just below it, a handwritten note from the girl. You're not here, Mommy, but this place is full of you. In that home, rebuilt from scraps of love and threads of courage, every silence from Clarice became presence, and every absence became another reason to keep going. But the world out there doesn't forget easily those who dare challenge. The powerful and Celso in Raid's name would soon return to haunt their lives. 2 months after the adoption ruling, Dario received an unexpected invitation, National Congress on Business Ethics. Guest speaker, Dario Monteclaro. He'd almost declined. But Livia, curious, asked, Are you going to tell our story? Dario hesitated. If you let me, I will, she replied without thinking. Then tell it beautifully. Tell it like it's a secret that the world deserves to hear. And so he did. That night, Dario walked onto the stage of a packed auditorium. Suit. No. Just a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled up. No slides, no marketing, just him, and a silence that listened. I came to talk about what money can't buy, what power can't protect, and what only love can sustain, some executives whispered. Skeptical. But he continued. I spent my life building empires, winning contracts, crushing competitors, but I never beat my own pride until one day, a little girl gave me a note. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket. 7 words, written in colored pencil. You need to sculpt a poor Turnasgito. Papai, I'm sorry for being born. Daddy, the audience fell silent. That moment, I fell apart. Not because I knew who she was, but because, even without knowing, I felt. Because some words don't hit your ears, they hit your chest. Dario told everything. Clarice. The search, the DNA that didn't match, the love that insisted. Celso and Ray. The threats, the fight for justice. Clarice was silenced by a system that protects the powerful and suffocates the decent. But she didn't. Die quietly. She left a daughter, a seed. And that girl, she taught me to see what I never wanted to see. Dario paused. His voice cracked. Today, I no longer want to build skyscrapers. I want to build bridges. Between fathers and children, between mistakes and forgiveness, between past and future. And if you, businessmen, really want to change the world, then start at home. Be fathers before bosses. Be human before rich. The audience, once distracted, now listened like each word was a mirror. Dario looked to the back of the room, and there, standing, was Livia, holding Rubens's hand, and Dona Nilda, emotional, beside them. That little girl from the note now carries my name, not by law's imposition, but because we chose to be a family, even without DNA, even without history. We chose to start from scratch. And write our own version. Standing ovation. Long. Emotional. But Dario didn't smile. He just bowed his head and whispered, Some people are born invisible, but they weren't born to live erased. Outside, journalists swarmed. Mr. Monteclaro, Will you sue Celso Andrade for threats and blackmail? Dario answered calmly, I don't seek revenge. I seek example. And if justice wants to act, it will. That night, back home, he found Livia in the yard. She was drawing on the sidewalk with colorful chalk. What are you doing out here, young lady? Drawing our house, but from the inside. Dario crouched down, watching there, on the ground, in childish strokes, a couch with 4 people, a bike leaning nearby. And at the top, written in wobbly letters, this house is full of people who learn how to love. Dario cried again, but with pride, because in the end, it was never just about adoption or justice. It was about belonging, about giving a name to what once was emptiness. About turning a house into a place where no one ever has to apologize for being born. Life was finally starting to take the shape Dario never imagined wanting. Burnt pancakes for breakfast made by Livia's hands, bedtime stories on the couch, scribbles on the fridge that read, my dad is a hero in a wrinkled suit, but peace, my friend, true peace is a luxury that doesn't last, especially when enemies know exactly where to strike. It was on a cloudy Wednesday when the doorbell rang insistently. Dario answered. A court officer, emotionless, handed him an envelope. Judicial citation, civil lawsuit filed by Celso Andrade. Grounds, defamation, slander, and emotional damages. He wasn't surprised. He expected something like this, but the content was more poisonous than he'd imagined. Celso wasn't just suing him. He had brought false witnesses, forged documents, and was demanding $1 million raise in compensation, plus a public retraction. That bastard. Dario muttered, closing the door gently. In the kitchen, Livia was drawing. Dad, want to see what I made? In a minute, sweetheart. I just need to think, because now, the problem wasn't just a lawsuit. It was strategy. Celso wanted to bury him, destroy his image in the media, turn Clarissa's story into some melodramatic delusion of a millionaire having a midlife crisis. Dario called his lawyer. We're going in. Full force. Are you sure? This could drag on for years. He'll try to ruin you publicly. Let him try. Because if we don't fight for those who can't speak anymore, we become accomplices to silence. In the days that followed, planted news began appearing, blogs questioning Dario's romanticized version. Columnists speculating it was all a PR stunt to clean up past business scandals, none of which ever existed. But who needs facts when gossip is easier to swallow? Livia started noticing the way classmates looked at her. A teacher accidentally made a comment nearby. She's that Dario Monteclaro's daughter? Poor thing. That night, she came home quieter than usual. At dinner, she pushed the rice around. Dad, did we do something wrong? He knelt beside her chair. Wrong? Never. What we did was what most people are afraid to do. Tell the truth. And that bothers some. But I don't like when they talk about mommy like she made it all up. I don't either, sweetheart. That's why we're going to fight. For her, for us, for everyone who still lives what she went through. That night, Ruben showed up with a box full of old documents. I've been quiet, Dario, but that's over. I found some old emails from Clarice from when Livia was a baby. She wrote in fear. She said she had a boss with a dangerous smile. I think this will help. Yes, it will. Because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about all the Clarices out there. Dona Nilda also stepped up. If I have to, I'll walk into that court with my cane and my whole memory. I never miss a cry from that girl. I know what her mother went through, and I'll tell it. They began assembling a full dossier. They proved Celso's documents were forged, gathered new former employees willing to testify. And for the first time, Celso Andrade felt cornered, but no one expected his next move. Even dirtier. By the end of the month, Dario received an emergency summons. Celso had filed a petition to revoke the adoption, claiming that the public scandal was harming the child's psychological well-being, that Dario was not fit to be a legal guardian. The table shook under the impact of that paper. In the hallway, Livia overheard by accident. They want to take me away from you? They'll have to go through the whole world first. Sweetheart. She ran into his arms. Then hold me tight. And he did. As if the world was about to collapse right there in the living room. Because sometimes, the past doesn't. Knocked it breaks in uninvited and demands we apologize for ever locking it out. And the battle ahead would be the hardest of all. Asterisk the request to revoke the adoption felt like a slap in the face. Not because of the legal procedure, but because of what it symbolized. It was like the system was saying, You're not enough. Not as a father, not as a man. But if life had taught Dario anything, it was that some fights you don't choose, you just fight them. Livia cried for the first time. She couldn't hide it. She locked herself in her room with her sketchbook and spent the night coloring a portrait of the family she was afraid of losing all over again. Donanilda, unfazed, called every journalist who had ever spoken ill of Dario. If you had the guts to spread lies, then have the same microphone to listen to those who carry the truth. Rubens went to the police, filed a report, submitted Clarice's old emails as evidence of covert harassment, and Dario did something he'd never done before. He called a press conference, wrinkled suit, tired eyes, Livia at his side, holding his hand. You want to know if I'm her father? Then look at her. He held up one of her drawings. She draws me next to her, in every scribble, in every notebook. This is identity. This is love. The press fell silent, and in that silence, the truth shouted across town. Celso Andrade was strategizing like a man playing chess with people's lives, but he underestimated one thing: collective memory. Jonah's testimony, the former employee, went viral. Other women stepped forward. A parliamentary inquiry was launched into the Andrade Foundation's conduct, and for the first time, Celso's mask cracked in public. Still, the hearing to revoke the adoption stayed on the calendar. It would be the final round. The day of the final hearing dawned cold, gray, and heavy. In the car, on the way to court, Livia held a drawing on her lap. It showed a house, to people hugging, and, written at the top, a family isn't who makes you, it's who never leaves you. At the entrance of the courthouse, dozens of reporters, signs held by people in support. We are all Clarice. Every child deserves to choose love. Dario didn't flinch. He entered holding Livia's hand like it was the last solid bridge in a world made of fog. Inside the courtroom, silence was total. Celso Andrade sat in the front row with a smug look, surrounded by his lawyers. The judge entered, the same one who had granted the adoption months earlier. We are here to assess a petition for revocation of the adoption of minor Livia Monteclaro, filed by Mr. Celso Andrade. Andrade, please explain your reasons. Celso stood. His tone was rehearsed. Artificial. Your Honor, I am concerned for the child's safety. Mr. Monteclaro has exposed her to the public. He dragged her into the media. A minor cannot be used as a shield in a personal vendetta. The judge turned to Dario. Your defense? He stood, took a breath that reached deep inside his chest. Your Honor, I don't need to explain love. I just need to show it. He turned to Livia, who walked to the judge and handed over the drawing she had made. This is my voice. The judge looked at the paper and read the sentence out loud. Silence. Then the psychologist from the first evaluation stood up. Your Honor, if I may, revoking this adoption would be an act of psychological violence. This child has experienced abandonment. She found belonging. To remove her from the only family that actually stayed would be to repeat the same trauma. Celso's lawyers tried to interject. The judge raised a hand. Enough. I've seen enough. She took her pen. But before she could sign, Rubens asked to speak. Your Honor, I wasn't a good man before, but today I am, and I'm here to confirm, if anyone tries to take that girl away from where she is happy, I'll be the first to stop it. Because Dario didn't steal a daughter, he saved a soul. The judge signed the paper. Firm. Unwavering. Double quotes. Petition denied. The adoption remains valid and irrevocable. Case closed. Applause broke out. The court officer had to call for order. Livia jumped into Dario's arms. Can we go home now? He smiled. We never left. The months that followed were of slow healing. The lawsuit from Celso dismissed. The public pressure and growing testimonies led to a full federal investigation. Celso was indicted for corruption, harassment, and obstruction of justice. The Andrade Foundation collapsed like a house of cards. Dario didn't celebrate. He wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted silence, but not the kind that hides. The kind that finally breathes. At home, routine returned. Morning cartoons. School lunches, homework battles. And drawings. Lots of drawings. One afternoon, Dario noticed something new. Livia had drawn Clarice for the first time. Wavy hair, soft eyes, a sky blue dress. At the bottom, the girl had written, "Now you can rest. Mommy, you're safe in us." Dario framed that drawing, hung it next to the family photo. Every night, before bed, He'd stop in front of it, not to pray, not to cry, just to remember that everything started with a note in a restaurant, 7 words, and the courage of a little girl to say what no adult had ever dared to feel. Years passed. Livia grew from child to teenager, from sketchbooks to paintings. She wanted to study art and open a school for kids like her who had gone through the system, who had lost, who had gained. On her 18th birthday, she organized an exhibition, theme, Invisible Children. Dozens of canvases, stories transformed into color, and in the center of the gallery, a single painting, a man in a suit, kneeling on a restaurant floor, holding a note. Title of the piece, When He Finally Heard Me. Dario cried as if it were the first day, because it always felt like the first day. He hugged his daughter, now a woman. Thank you for not giving up on me, Livia. She smiled. You didn't give up on me either. And in that instant, time paused, because some people spend their whole lives chasing fortune, and others find it sitting across the table with braids, colored pencils, and 7 words that change everything.